Hey, everybody, welcome back. I have Coach Whitney Reese with me today, and we're going to talk about telehealth, partly because I'm really curious about it, but also because with the virus, obviously COVID-19, with everything that's going on, I think that telehealth is going to be something that the world sees a heck of a lot more of very, very quickly. So I brought Whitney on because she's an expert in the field and she's becoming an expert in what it means to put the tele in front of everything. So Whitney, would you do me a favor and can you just broadly define what telehealth is supposed to represent?
Yeah, so I can definitely speak to it from the perspective of physical therapy. And this is where there is probably some confusion around definitions. Technically it means that you're performing a health service in a remote environment. And right now, each state is a little bit different in how they define being able to provide that service. So there are some states that say that is defined by the state that the licensed provider holds their license in. Some states define that as the location of residence of the individual receiving the service. So, for example, I live in Texas. I can't cross state lines right now. So if I have a individual in Arizona that would like something like telehealth physical therapy, my license doesn't cross that state line.
Okay.
So even though I have access to a direct access in Texas and Arizona does, for telehealth, there's some lines that the provider, and that's on the provider, not on the individual receiving the service. That's on the provider to know how that's defined for their scope of practice for the state. Separately from that, there's a difference between telehealth and an e-visit. The wording in Texas means that the majority of physical therapists in Texas are going to be calling that service an e-visit. And that some of that is some technical definitions that are coming from Medicare on the federal level. My personal opinion on that is I think it's meant to separate the confusion between a physician telehealth appointment and an actual visit online like this, where you're walking someone through something in a remote environment. Because the medical system isn't really based in its education platforms right now for diagnosing anything in a remote environment. So what you can't do in a e-visit as a physical therapist is I can't use my hands to check a joint range of motion. I can't use my hands to palpate a muscle to see if there's a change in tone or temperature or texture or a trigger point. And I can't put someone in a flexibility test. So there's some things that you really can't do in a remote environment as a skilled provider. So it does change things a lot, actually.
So would you do me a favor? Would you tell everybody what your specific experience with this has been? So how are you providing telehealth or e-visits at this point?
So the last couple of weeks, that's been really interesting. In the background, what I've been doing is I have been working with a company in Texas, which is Texas Physical Therapy Specialists, on getting a training platform set up for their clinicians that are going to provide these services. So that has been examples of best practices, which is things like how do you effectively establish rapport and have appropriate body language in a remote environment? Because in healthcare, we're not trained how to do that. We're trained all those soft skills in a face-to-face environment. The other thing that I've been doing is examples of what can you actually test in a video-based platform. So how do you check spinal range of motion? How do you assess the shoulder? How do you assess the knee, the ankle, the foot, the hip, to be able to say, this is the thing I am actually treating, knowing I can only get you so far, because at some point there is research that says at some point for certain conditions, the best level of care is hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing that for about a month now. And then also been vetting some of the platforms used for videos, because in healthcare, there's a Patient Privacy Act. So there's only so many platforms that actually will guarantee that your video platform protects that private information. Zoom is not one of them.
Zoom is the opposite of one of
Zoom
them
is
right
not
now.
one of them. Right? So what I couldn't do, which I do with coaching clients all the time, I can't jump on a Zoom call with a patient. And as much as I absolutely love True Coach, as a coach for a patient, it's not one of the platforms I can use right now. So as a provider, this is where personally there's a lot of confusion in healthcare right now for providing these services. Is, I would challenge other providers as well. Know the platform you're using, and if it's not HIPAA compliant, it's not worth the risk right now to even try to use that platform.
Mm-hmm.
Which does mean there's very few platforms that do that HIPAA compliant video option.
Gotcha. How is telehealth different or the same as telemedicine?
Um, it's a difference of semantics.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a difference of semantics, and some of that as well. I mentioned e-visit versus telehealth. Different insurance companies do determine the word they are okay with you using or not.
Interesting. Okay.
So there, to follow all things in telehealth or telemedicine, until recently, that was a cash pay service only. So you very much knew exactly what you were getting. You set it up on a plan. It's just like setting up a contract for services. I know exactly how much I'm going to get per service. I know it's going to be 30 minutes or 45 or an hour, and I know how many times a week or a month we're gonna do this. Well, with insurance companies coming to the table, thankfully in response to everything that's going on, because there are many people that cannot cash pay for something like telehealth or telemedicine. But with insurance companies coming to the table, it does change the value for service, and it does change wording. And I won't be surprised if we start to see that there are more sections of definitions of the differences between telemedicine versus telehealth versus like an e-visit. I think those are going to have to get a bit heftier in their definitions and delineations in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, isn't that crazy to think about something like Medicare, Medicaid, and the insurance companies needing to do this in a couple weeks?
Oh,
That,
it's been absolutely crazy, and we I would say we've been cautious in Texas. I personally think for appropriate reasons of just telling people just wait, just breathe. We're gonna talk to you no matter what, and we're gonna communicate with you in a platform no matter what that's HIPAA compliant until we get some answers at the state level or through insurance companies or federally.
hmm.
And that's been probably the hardest thing to do for the past week, is to pump the brakes a little bit and ask society to be patient for a week of like, we have answers, we have systems in place. The training started almost a month ago, but please wait for us to make sure that the day we say we can do this visit, we actually can do it, and we know we're on a platform someone else can't hack in on, and that your information is protected and safe. And that's been
Gotcha.
really hard to do.
So you mentioned a couple pieces that I would have taken either as good or bad things, but kind of as a recap, what are some of the trade-offs to the negative of telehealth? So what are some of the things that either you as a practitioner or a client might not like as much about telehealth?
Um, One of the large trade-offs is not being able to do many special tests. The standard for ruling in and ruling out a condition or a diagnosis for the standard of medicine has been based upon a physical exam. And so not being able to do that does take, on the negative side, knowing I might misunderstand the primary cause because I don't 100% have a way to test it right now. But the positive is learning to communicate better and think out loud of what you think something is, and arming the person on the other side of the camera right now with, here's the three things I think it is, here's why. Here's my plan to start with step 1, step 2, and step 3. Are you okay with that as a starting point? I think it teaches people to learn that way faster. And I think
Mm,
that what you're going to see is you're going to see the people that have had years of practice in a remote setting and a lot of time really working on soft skills and focusing on communication and having a system and retention. I think you're going to see those are the people that survive this sudden influx of everybody is an online expert and everyone is remote and everyone is doing e-visits and telehealth. And honestly, everyone is, but that doesn't mean that the years of practice of having that system in place and identifying the appropriate patient is there. Because there are some patients you cannot do telehealth with. Like, I can't do vertigo in a telehealth setting. Someone that's had a knee surgery, I actually do need to check that knee to see if it's swollen and warm and red and see if it's healing appropriately and make sure there's not a blood clot. I can't do that on a computer screen. So there are some things that under those scenarios, you have to judge the risk versus the reward for that patient. And I think we're going to see that further separate a number of things in the next couple weeks as well.
yeah, me too. Gosh, okay, let's call it there for right now. But I might parlay some more questions on this just because
Okay.
I'm now very interested in the connection between remote coaching versus health medicine, etc. But I really appreciate you coming on. I learned some good pieces too. I hadn't even thought about the semantics piece on telehealth, telemedicine. So I appreciate that, and I think a lot of people are going to get some good stuff out of this, especially as they start seeing ads for telehealth in their social
Yes.
channels and stuff.
Yes. I would suggest if it offers a discovery phone call, it's worth the discovery phone call to find out if you're going to get what you're actually wanting.
Yeah, and probably have some specific questions about what the expectation would be from the client side to see if they can deliver on that.
Correct.
Awesome. Whitney, thank you so much for coming on. We'll see you
Thank
guys
you,
next
Tim.
time.
Yeah.